There is a sentence in Seneca's third letter to Lucilius that most people scroll past on their way to something more quotable. It reads, in the Phantom rendering, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." Seneca was around 55 when he wrote that. He was one of the wealthiest men in Rome, tutor and advisor to Nero, a playwright, a philosopher with a readership that stretched across the empire. And he was watching with the specific, unsentimental clarity of a man who had already survived exile to Corsica and an emperor's court. As friends and colleagues around him chased positions and honors they would never live long enough to enjoy. He was not writing motivational content. He was trying to tell the truth about time to a younger man he loved, in a form precise enough that the truth might actually land. If you are past 40, you have already encountered the question this script is about. You may not have phrased it, you may have felt it as restlessness, or as a quiet withdrawal from things that used to matter, or as a morning when you sat with your coffee and thought, not dramatically, not with despair, but with a kind of flat, honest clarity. Is this all there is? The career that was going to go further, the body that was going to stay, the future that was going to be longer. The moment when remaining years become countable is not an abstraction. It arrives on a Tuesday. It arrives in a doctor's waiting room, or at a retirement dinner, or on the drive home from a funeral that was not your parents' funeral, but your friends. And the question it opens is not whether life has meaning in some grand philosophical sense. The question is smaller and more immediate. What do you do with what is left, now that you can see the edges? The Stoic tradition has been answering that question for 2,300 years. Not with slogans, not with hustle, with a specific set of practices grounded in specific texts, developed by people who were facing specific versions of the same problem. What follows is not a life hack. It is a careful reading of what three Stoic thinkers, Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, actually said about the experience of discovering that your life is finite, and most of what you spent it chasing was not, by the tradition's careful measure, genuinely yours to begin with. And what they proposed you do next. Start with what Seneca is actually saying in that letter. The full text is the dialogue known as On the Shortness of Life, addressed to Paulinus, his father-in-law, though the idea runs through the letters to Lucilius as well. His argument is not that you should seize the day in the modern carpe diem sense, not that you should travel more, experience more, optimize more. His argument is that the problem is not the quantity of time, but the quality of attention. Life is long enough, he writes, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested. The waste he identifies is specific. It is not leisure. It is not rest. It is preoccupation, the state of being perpetually oriented toward the next thing, the thing after this, the promotion, the recognition, the project that will finally feel like enough. The preoccupied person, Seneca says, is someone who is never present in the life they are actually living. They are always rehearsing or recovering. They experience their existence as a hallway between rooms they never enter. You recognize this. If you have spent 20 or 30 years in a career, you recognize this. The Stoic term that gets closest to what Seneca is diagnosing is prohairesis, the faculty of choice, the governing capacity of the mind to assent to or reject the impressions that arrive. In Epictetus, who develops the concept most fully in the discourses recorded by his student Arrian, prohairesis is what is genuinely up to us. And the list of what is up to us in Epictetus's formulation at the opening of the Enchiridion, in Robinhard's translation, is narrower than modern self-help has made it sound. Some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. Read that list again. Your body is not up to you. Your property is not up to you. Your reputation is not up to you. Your position is not up to you. If you are past 40 and have spent decades building a career, raising children, maintaining a body, constructing a reputation, Epictetus is telling you that none of those things were ever yours. Not in the deepest sense. Not in the sense that matters for your freedom. This is where most popular treatments of the dichotomy of control stop. They reduce it to a productivity framework. Focus your energy on what you can control. But that misses the radical claim Epictetus is making. He is not offering an efficiency tip. He is saying that your good, your actual well-being, your freedom, your flourishing, is located exclusively in the correct use of your judgments and voluntary actions. Everything else, the tradition calls indifferent, not worthless, not to be ignored, but not the location of your good. The person who says, "Is this all there is?" is often someone who has been locating their good in indifference for decades and has just noticed. This is not a comfortable realization. The tradition does not pretend it is. Epictetus was born into slavery around 55 CE. His master was Epaphroditus, a freedman of Nero. One ancient source, Origen, writing much later, says his leg was broken by his master. Another tradition says he had a chronic disability from youth. What is certain is that he was freed, studied Stoic philosophy under Musonius Rufus, and eventually established a school at Nicopolis in northwestern Greece. He wrote nothing himself. Everything we have was recorded by Arrian, who also wrote the best surviving account of Alexander the Great's campaigns. So when Epictetus says, "Your body is not up to you," he is speaking from a specific position. When he says, "Your social standing is not up to you," he is a former slave telling the sons of Roman senators what freedom actually means. The dichotomy is smaller than self-help makes it. That is the point. Now bring this into your morning. You wake up. The body is stiffer than it was 10 years ago. There is a task at work that you once would have attacked with energy, and that now feels like furniture you are rearranging. There is a relationship that has settled into patterns you did not choose. There is a plan you had for this decade that is not going to happen. And the voice that says, "Is this all there is not, in the Stoic framework, a symptom of depression. Though if that voice is persistent, heavy, and accompanied by loss of function, the tradition is clear that professional help is appropriate. And this script says the same without hesitation. The voice, in the Stoic reading, is the beginning of philosophical clarity. It is the moment when you stop confusing indifference with goods. It is what the tradition calls waking up. Marcus Aurelius practiced a specific technique for staying inside that clarity. Scholars call it the view from above. Pierre Hadot, in his essential study, Philosophy as a Way of Life, traces the practice through multiple Stoic and Platonic sources. In the Meditations, which Marcus wrote in Greek for himself on campaign, never intending publication, the exercise appears repeatedly. In Book 9, in Gregory Hayes's translation, Marcus writes, "Survey the records of other eras, and see how many others gave their all and then were buried by the earth." In Book 4, Asia, Europe, corners of the world, the ocean, a drop of water, Mount Athos, a clod of dirt, the present, a split second in eternity. The practice is not nihilism. Marcus is not saying nothing matters. He is recalibrating the scale. Your frustration with a colleague, your anxiety about a project's outcome, your resentment at being passed over, these are real. They are also, seen from sufficient height, very brief perturbations in a very large field. The view from above is not a thought experiment you do once. It is a discipline. Marcus returned to it again and again across the meditations because it kept wearing off. That is important. The meditations are not the polished conclusions of a sage. They are the working notes of a practitioner who kept losing the thread and kept picking it up again. If you have tried to maintain any contemplative practice, meditation, journaling, prayer, and evening review, and found that it drifts into either performance or self-recrimination, you are in the company of a Roman emperor who had the same problem. The sage is rare because the practice is hard. There is a misreading of Stoic acceptance that deserves direct correction here, because it circulates widely and it is precisely wrong. The misreading says, Stoicism teaches you to accept what happens and stop trying to change things. This is resignation dressed in a toga. What the texts actually teach is more demanding and more useful. Epictetus, in the Discourses, Book 2, Chapter 5, lays out the logic. Suffering comes not from events, but from our judgments about events. The person who says, "This should not be happening to me," suffers twice. Once from the event, and once from the resistance to the event. The Stoic practice is to separate the event from the judgment attached to it. Examine the judgment and correct it if it rests on a false premise. The false premise is usually some version of this indifferent thing, this outcome, this body, this reputation was mine to keep. But acceptance of what has happened is not passivity about what happens next. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire. Seneca engaged in active political life until the day Nero ordered him to die. Cato chose death at Utica rather than submit to Caesar. The Stoic tradition produced more politically engaged figures than quietist ones. The acceptance is backward-looking. What has happened, and wishing otherwise is a waste of the attention you need for what comes next. The energy is forward-looking, directed at what is genuinely up to you, which is the quality of your response. The difference between acceptance and resignation is the difference between a person sitting in a waiting room wishing they were somewhere else and a person sitting in a waiting room reading. Both are in the same room. One is present. The other is in a hallway. If you came to these texts after something specific, a diagnosis, a divorce, a layoff, the death of someone who was not supposed to die yet, you came the way most serious readers come. The tradition does not promise to make the loss smaller. Seneca's Consolation to Marcia, written to a woman grieving her son's death, says directly that grief is natural, and the initial tears are not within our control. What the tradition offers is a framework for what to do with the grief once the first wave has passed. Not suppress it, not perform recovery, but examine the judgments that keep reopening the wound. The judgments that say this should not have happened, that say the world owes you a different outcome, that say your remaining life is diminished rather than clarified. Some readers find this helpful. Some find it insufficient. Martha Nussbaum, in The Therapy of Desire, raises the serious question of whether the Stoic framework asks more of human beings in the face of loss than human beings can or should bear. The question is worth sitting with. The tradition is strong enough to survive it. Here is what I want you to notice about the original Seneca passage, the one about wasting time. He does not say you wasted it on pleasure. He does not say you wasted it on rest. He says you wasted it on preoccupation, on being somewhere other than where you are, oriented towards something other than what is in front of you. The "is this all there is?" question in this reading is not a discovery that life is empty. It is a discovery that you have been absent from a life that was full, and that some of it is still available. The Stoic practice for this is not dramatic. Seneca, in letter 83 to Lucilius, describes his own evening review. He goes over the day. What did I correct? Where did I resist a bad habit? Where did I fall short? The tone, as he describes it, is not self-punishment. It is self-observation. The sleep that follows this self-examination, he writes, how sweet it is. Donald Robertson, whose work bridges Stoicism and modern cognitive behavioral therapy, has noted that this practice is structurally similar to therapeutic journaling techniques used in CBT today. The lineage is real. Aaron Beck acknowledged Stoic influence, and the overlap is documented. But the Stoic version is embedded in a larger philosophical framework that CBT does not carry. The evening review is not a mental health intervention. It is a philosophical discipline aimed at living in accordance with the rational nature the Stoics believed human beings share. If you want to try it, the practice is simple. Not easy. Simple. At the end of the day, before sleep, review. What impressions arrived today that I assented to without examination? Where did I treat an indifferent, a reputation, an outcome, a comfort, as though it were a genuine good? Where did I locate my well-being in something that is not up to me? The point is not to produce guilt. The point is to produce clarity, and to do it again the next day. The work is not the epiphany. The work is the morning. I want to close with something Marcus Aurelius wrote in Book 5 of the Meditations. In Hayes's translation, at dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work. As a human being, what do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do? He wrote this, as best scholars can reconstruct, during the campaigns along the Danube frontier, probably in his 50s, probably cold, probably exhausted. He was not performing motivation. He was reasoning with himself in the dark. The passage continues, and it is honest in a way that motivational reframings of it never are. He acknowledges that the bed is warm, and the work is hard, and the temptation to stay is real. He does not pretend the temptation away. He reasons through it. If you are sitting with the question, the real one, the one that does not resolve with a vacation or a purchase or a new project, the Stoic answer is not that there is more. The Stoic answer is that there is enough, if you are present for it. The years that remain are not a diminished portion. They are, for the first time, yours, because you are finally in a position to stop locating your good in things that were never up to you. What is up to you is the quality of your attention this morning, the accuracy of your judgments today, the character you bring to what is in front of you right now. That is not a small thing. That is, by the tradition's careful measure, the whole thing. If you came to these texts in midlife, I am curious about the specific circumstance that brought you. Consider leaving it in the comments, not for engagement metrics, but because this conversation is better when it includes the reasons people actually read. Subscribe if you want the tradition taken seriously without being solemnized. There is more to say about these texts, and we will say it slowly. Seneca, in that same letter about time, writes one more line that most summaries leave out. You are living as if destined to live forever. Your own frailty never occurs to you. He was not scolding. He was describing something he recognized in himself. The recognition is the beginning, not the end. The beginning.